Welcome back to the ZX Spectrum Compilation Chart Challenge. We'll start with the usual update on the physical collection that I've been amassing, and we've had another 15 compilations arrive since the last video, with at least that many yet to be received, so let's have a look. To choose the compilation I'll review this time, I ran a poll on the World of Spectrum Facebook group, and from this choice of 4 compilations for under a fiver, there was a clear winner. Action Pack was a series of compilations by Alligata software that were exclusively sold through the WHSmith's chain of shops. There were 3 Action Packs released, and whilst I have volumes 1 and 3, little is known about the Spectrum version of volume 2, not even a list of the games that were contained on it. Volume 1 was released in 1986, and it contained 4 games: Son of Blagger, Labyrinthion, Show Jumping, and Jack Charlton's Match Fishing. It was also released on the Commodore 64 and Amstrad, though with different games. 3 of the games had been previously released at full price by Alligata, but one, Labyrinthion, was only ever a budget release on their Budgie label. Okay, so here we have Action Pack in all its glory. It's a single jewel case. It's got the 4 images of the games on the front. Quite small, so I found it difficult to see what they were all about by looking at that front cover, but I quite like the pink and blue styling of it. So that's the front cover. Down the spine we have Action Pack, Spectrum 48K and 128K, that's it. And then if we turn to the back, now what I don't know is if this was the original cassette case or whether it came in a clear single jewel, but I'm assuming it's the original, and a lot of games came in this, certainly in 1985, came in this style with a black back rather than fully clear. But if we open it up, we can see on there we've got the 4 screenshots from the games, the details of Alligata, and it says Action Pack, 4-in-1 for the Spectrum 48-128. But, oops, dropping it all. Let's just get that all back together. What I do love is this little thing down here. That gives me proper nostalgia, that little WHSmith logo. Love that. Okay, so let's have a look at the inside and hope I don't drop it all again. So, we've had a look at the outside there. There's the full outside of the case. Shame that the little holes have cut through some of the screenshots, but never mind, that's not important. And then we can fold out to see instructions there for Show Jumping and Match Fishing on the pink, and then on the back of that we've got Labyrinthion and Son of Blagger. The instructions, the text is quite small. Old eyes like mine struggle a little bit. But it does give you all the keys for everything. It tells you about the games, and yeah, there's not much more you would expect from a case, from a single jewel. It does its job. Everything very small and compact, but it does its job. Then we have the tape. We've got the Action Pack Spectrum 4-in-1, the WHSmith logo, and the 4 games. Now I'm assuming because it says the 4 games on each side, that means that all 4 games are on both sides of the tape rather than being split 2 and 2. But yeah, that's Action Pack for you. I like that the cassette is following the same style, the same fonts and things as the cassette case, but it's a small package, but that's kind of what you expect for a cheap compilation. £4.99, only available in WHSmith's, and 4 games from Alligata. I think 3 of them written by the same person, Elliot Gay, off the top of my head, but we'll probably discuss that more when I look at the individual games. Yeah, I mean, it looks fine. What do you expect for £4.99? Show Jumping is a 1986 game, so it will have been fairly new when this pack came out. It's the first of 3 games written by Elliot Gay. Elliot appears to have had a fairly successful career with Alligata and then Virgin, penning hits such as How to Be a Complete Bastard, or bastard if you're southern or posh, and the interpretation of the board game Scruples. It's certainly not a sport that would immediately spring to mind, and other than the equestrian event in Summer Games 2, which was more of a race game like the hurdles in Decathlon, or Harvey Smith's Show Jumper, which is remarkably similar to Alligata's effort, but C64 only, I can't think of any other games to tackle the sport. Reviews were fairly good, with Crash awarding 70% and calling it a very worthy simulation, while Sinclair User dedicated a 2-page spread for its 4 out of 5 review, commenting that those who attach more importance to the game over splashy background graphics or frills should certainly check out one of the more attractive simulations. Things start off really well, with this wonderful loading screen which has some fantastic shading and colour placement to really get the best out of the image. Once in game, we can choose from 1 to 8 players and then get an overview of the course. Level 1's easy, in that there are just 4 jumps, and they're all jumped in the same right to left direction. That doesn't mean achieving a no-fault round is a given though, as the rotational controls can at first be difficult, and you also have 4 speeds to deal with: stand, walk, trot and canter. There are 2 ways to fail each round. The first is by knocking down beams or hitting fences, which will rack up faults, and should you exceed the level's fault limit, which is advised at the start of each level, then the round is over. But more common is the 3 refusals rule. Time your jump too late and your horse may refuse, meaning you have to reset your run and try again. 3 refusals on any course will see your round end in disaster. Level 2 sees the difficulty start to increase, with more fences and more turns. With its small but really well drawn and animated characters, challenging but fun gameplay and neat presentation, I really enjoyed Show Jumping. I may not have wanted to pay £8 for it as a standalone game, but that's why I love compilations so much, when we find little gems like this for such a low price. And I'm going to score Show Jumping 7 points. But don't do what I did and forget to sprint back to the opposite end of the course for the final jump. Oh, and don't crash into the finish line either. Labyrinthion was released on Alligata's budget label, Budgie, for £2.99 in 1986. It's obviously an Atic Atak inspired arcade adventure, where you must search a timeless labyrinth of death for 9 parts of a scroll that will give you directions to the exit. However, you'll also need other items to pass between each of the 5 sectors, as well as a sector key. You can protect yourself from the various rats, frogs and other nasties by collecting a fly swatter, mousetrap or bucket and using them on the appropriate foe, or by firing your limited ammo weapon. For a budget game, that sounds like a hell of a lot to squeeze in, and unfortunately it is. The comic loading screen lures you into a false sense of security that this will be a comedic and fun adventure. But just as soon as we get into the game, we find an extremely limited play area, overzealous baddies and overcomplicated controls that have 4 additional keys in addition to the standard directions and fire. With so little room to run and so many enemies homing in on you, the game quickly becomes a mad dash from room to room in the hope that an item will just happen to be there. The simple addition of some respite areas or rooms where you could catch your breath and formulate a strategy would have greatly improved things. But what we have is an overly difficult, overly complicated and overly restrictive game that really isn't any fun to play. So I'm going to award Labyrinthion 4 points. Jack Charlton's Match Fishing is a 1985 release, and whilst not the first fishing game, Sinclair Programs had a type-in called Match Fishing in February 1984, and even earlier there was the Cassette 50 game Fishing Mission, but it was the first to achieve widespread coverage. Despite being a member of the 1966 World Cup winning squad, Jack Charlton wasn't exactly a pop pin-up in the 80s. In 1985, he was just about to resign as Newcastle manager due to fan protests, and was yet to hit the heights of his World Cup and Euros campaigns as the manager of Republic of Ireland, so he was never going to get a football game. But what he did have was a BBC TV series called Go Fishing with Jack Charlton, and he hosted the only televised fishing competition, Hooked. Whether the game was designed with Jack in mind, I don't know. I'd guess that it wasn't though, as other than his name on the title screen and him loitering on the cover like your weird uncle, there's nothing really to justify the name. But Alligata went all out, even running a competition in Crash to win a week's adventure holiday and a full set of fishing tackle by identifying different types of fish. Crash's review gave it 74%, which he says is from a fisherman's point of view, and that it would have limited appeal to those who prefer making a lot of noise by the riverbank. The game itself is for 1 to 8 players, and the blurb does heavily suggest that the more people who are involved the better. So I invited my old mates, Alan and Jack, over for a chance to get their tackle wet. After entering the names, each player is given 1 of 8 pegs, which is your position around the lake where you'll be fishing from. A lot of info is given about the swim conditions, including the surrounding foliage and water depth, etc. And you must use that information to make strategic choices about which rod or reel to use, the bait, line strength, hook size and float depth. When everyone's choices are registered, we're off to the lake, which is beautifully drawn, and I remember back in '85 wishing I could live in that lonely wooden lodge. As everyone sits, waiting for a bite, if you're lucky, your peg number will flash, and you must rush to the keyboard to press the corresponding number to snag the fish. We then turn to a side-on view of a rather pathetic-looking fisherman attempting to catch a cardboard fish by pressing space when it reaches the hook. So long as the hook or line don't snap, then the fish is yours and we return to the lake. If you're not getting any bites, then pressing T will allow any other players to change their tackle to try and improve their fortunes. We repeat this until the match timer runs out, when all the fish caught are totted up and the angler who has the heaviest keep net is the winner. I enjoyed JC's MF back in '85 and still do now, but I'm still as clueless as ever on what tackle I should use for each peg, and I would have liked a little more depth from the manual to help educate. Not a list of what works and what doesn't, but maybe some narrative from Jack that you could pick info out of, which would have also made the tie-in more worthwhile. It's also a shame that the actual action in the game is so poor. The catch graphics are laughable, and having nothing more to do than press space when a slow-moving fish gets to your hook is a huge missed opportunity. But all that said, with match lengths of up to 90 minutes, match fishing does a good job of replicating this slow-paced pastime, and I'd absolutely recommend getting 3 to 7 friends together, opening some beers and chatting while the game plays. The mad dash to the keyboard when someone gets a bite, sledging when one of the crew falls behind, and the lament of the one that got away makes match fishing a game I'm happy to recommend, with a slightly above average score of 6 out of 10. Son of Blagger is a 1984 release that was once again coded by Elliot Gay, but this time it's a conversion of the Commodore 64 sequel to the original game Blagger. Both Blaggers were written by legendary coder Anthony Crowther. Son of Blagger takes the generic mould for early 80s platformers and adds a large playfield that scrolls slowly as you reach the edge, and adds in escalators and a few other nice touches. But the Spectrum version gets off to a poor start with a stock Alligata loading screen, though admittedly with an OK Blagger logo. In-game, we get a fairly bland title screen and a very short tune, but little else in the way of presentation. The large play area is split into locked areas, and Blagger must collect keys in each area to enable him to move on to the next. The usual enemies are there to stop you, and planning a route is necessary due to the fall from height death mechanics that these games love. The graphics are colourful and competent, but Son of Blagger looks like his dad needs to put him on the Atkins diet, as he resembles a plump teddy bear more than the stealthy master thief Slippery Sid. The long arc of Sid's jump is hard to judge, meaning many almost moments where you think you'll succeed only to clip a baddie or deadly obstacle, and it's right back to the start. But everything in the game moves at a slow pace, and with every loss of life taking you right back to the start of the segment, I found my enthusiasm waning almost immediately. I wondered if this was just in translating it to the Specky, but having watched videos of the original C64 release, I can attest that the original is not much quicker. But a game like this can still triumph if it gets other things right, like level design, difficulty curve, graphics, etc. And in all of these areas, Son of Blagger rates just north of average. But with the complete lack of in-game sound and the death march pace of everything on screen, Son of Blagger is probably lucky to get its 5 out of 10. I would like to try it on an emulator with the CPU ramped up at some point, as there's definitely the bones of a reasonable game there. But as it stands, it'd probably be more accurate to call the game Son of Lagger. So that's your lot for Action Pack. Let's see what the magazines thought. And as usual, there isn't much in the way of coverage, but I did find a review from Computer Gamer in November '86. They say that show jumping is hard to master, Labyrinthion suffers from being too difficult early on. They seem quite happy with Son of Blagger though, saying that all the old favourites are present, like one-way and collapsing platforms, chutes, and bridges that open and close. They say that match fishing is an unusual simulation and not a sport that would spring to mind as suitable for a computer game. And they round it all off with a score of 12 out of 20, saying that Action Pack is a reasonable selection of games, nothing outstanding, nothing terribly bad. So how do our scores fare? Well, we know the individual game scores, and they averaged out at 5.5 points. The packaging is simple but colourful, and the instructions contain everything that's needed with keys, descriptions, screenshots and loading instructions. Single joules are never going to rate highly, but for a budget release this is probably just above average, so scores 6. The 4 games got a combined 22 points against a purchase price of £4.99, so that gives us a pence per point of 23p, which translates to 8 points. And using my advanced mathematics degree from the University of Little Britain, I calculate that Action Pack gets an overall score of 61%. Looking at our league tables, and by virtue of being the only budget compilation reviewed, Action Pack tops the budget only chart. But things are not so rosy in the overall table, where it sits 3rd out of 3 games. So that means that Alligata also sit 3rd on the constructors table. I'll be back with another multi-pack review soon. And as always, I'll leave some links to the resources used in making this video, and please stay for the post-credit bonus scene where I review the 3rd game in my Cascade Cassette 50 mini reviews. Welcome back. Today we're looking at Attacker by Ulrich Technical Services. UTS wrote a large number of the games on Cassette 50, so let's hope they did a good job. Attacker's actually the penultimate game on tape 2, so well done if you've ever got that far and actually played it. And without further ado, let's run the programme. And immediately we can hear that it's another one of those games with an annoying siren. So we'll get rid of that. Hopefully it's the same line number as last time. Yep, there it is. Let's delete line 1800 and run it again. We're greeted with the standard Cassette 50 instruction screen that tells us that you must capture the attacker by making him move through the trap. But if you're not quick enough, he'll steal 100 points. Get to 1,000 points and you win, or at minus 1,000 you'll lose. Controls are simple, just I and P to rotate the gate, and 0 to kick the attacker. Colour me intrigued. Okay, so not exactly the image the description suggested. It looks like I'm the shape in the middle, and the gate is the gap. So that means the attacker must be the ball. So I need to catch the attacker in the hole. Pressing the kick button when in line with the attacker appears to send it off in a pong-like tangent. But lining up the hole isn't that easy at first. And that's basically it. I'm getting the hang of it now. Repeat until you get 1,000 points, or until boredom causes you to fall asleep so the attacker can steal 1,000 points. And after all that, you get one sound effect and not even a congratulations. Attacker is a useless game that's a waste of my time and yours, and it only gets 1 point because I think this is still probably going to be worse on Cassette 50. So join me next time, and let's hope to God that the next game is better.